During the Christmas party, before anyone could react, Patricia yanked the violin right out of my daughter's hands. Right after that, Patricia held the violin up high and slammed it hard onto the floor. The sound of breaking would tore through the air. The $15,000 violin shattered into pieces. The strings snapped and twisted. The body cracked open. The neck almost completely separated. She didn't stop there. Patricia stepped on the broken pieces, grinding them under her heels like she wanted to erase the violin from existence entirely. The moment that violin broke was the moment my family relationships completely fell apart. This is a story that proves the saying, jealousy, if left unchecked, will create tragedies. Before I get into the details of the story, thank you for choosing my story today. I hope you have a day filled with joy. Give me a like if you want to wish me good things too. Hello everyone, I'm Marcus Webb, a 40-year-old software engineer living in Seattle. I have a small family with my wife, Jennifer, and my daughter, Lily. We live in a house in the Ballard neighborhood, where the sound of Lily's violin every afternoon has become a familiar part of our lives. Every time I see my daughter holding her violin with a bright smile, I'm overcome with a feeling of pride. But at the same time, I also feel a bit sad, because I still can't forget what happened almost 2 years ago, during the Christmas party at my parents' house. In December 2023, I accepted an invitation to my parents' Christmas party in Seattle. Lily was only 10 years old then. The whole way there, Lily carefully held her violin case in her arms, occasionally stroking the case affectionately. Before getting out of the car and walking into my parents' house, I turned to look at my daughter and gently said, "If you feel uncomfortable, just let me know. We can leave anytime." Right after I said that, Lily nodded, then took my hand and replied, "I'll be fine, Dad. I want to play violin for Grandpa." Hearing my daughter whisper, I reached up and patted her head to encourage her. We had just gotten out of the car when Dad opened the door and ran out, his face beaming. He spread his arms wide and hugged Lily tightly, then said to her, "There's my granddaughter. I missed you so much. You grew up so fast. I almost didn't recognize you." Lily giggled when my dad lifted her. Then he turned to me, slapped my shoulder hard, and said excitedly, "Marcus, you finally came home. I thought you forgot the way home." After Dad's joke, I smiled and replied, "I'm relieved that you're still as strong as ever." After a few greetings, Dad put his arm around my shoulder, his other hand leading Lily into the house. He kept asking about my work, about Lily's schooling. His enthusiasm made me feel warm after a year of being apart. When we walked into the house, the atmosphere completely changed. My mom was sitting on the sofa at that time, just glanced at us once, then turned back to talk to my sister. She didn't stand up, didn't greet us, just nodded slightly as if we were strangers. My sister, Patricia, was sitting next to my mom with her husband, Howard, and their 11-year-old daughter, Sophie. Sophie sat huddled in the corner of the sofa, her eyes sadly looking down at her hands. I noticed Sophie had lost a lot of weight since I last saw her. She seemed tired, her eyes lacking the brightness of a child. When Lily ran over to say hello, Sophie just forced a weak smile and then turned away. Just as I was still surprised by their attitude, my cousin Kevin walked out from the kitchen with a beer in his hand. Kevin was 28 that year, the son of Uncle Robert, my dad's younger brother. Kevin saw me and immediately came over to pat my shoulder, friendly, and said, "Marcus, long time no see. You look good." Following Kevin was Uncle Robert. He came over and put his arm around me and said warmly, "Marcus, I missed you so much. Lily's this big now. Last time I saw her, she was tiny." After what he said, I asked about his health and other relatives who were still sitting in my parents' living room. The enthusiasm and care that my relatives showed for my family made me feel warm. At that time, I had no idea that jealous eyes were watching our every move. Around 6 o'clock, the Christmas party took place in a forced atmosphere. Patricia constantly bragged about her management job, about big projects and year-end bonuses. Mom sat listening with satisfaction, occasionally nodding in approval. Howard occasionally chimed in to support his wife, but it was clear he also felt tense in the heavy atmosphere of the party. Uncle Robert tried to lighten the mood by telling old family memories. He talked about the times the whole family went camping at Mount Rainier when we were little, as well as the football games we watched together as a family. Kevin also tried to create a cheerful atmosphere by sharing enjoyable experiences from his military days, but I could see that he sensed the tension as well. In the middle of dinner, Mom suddenly turned to Sophie and asked with a somewhat harsh voice, "Sophie, how's piano going lately? Your mom said you've been skipping lessons for weeks now?" Sophie hung her head and didn't answer my mom's question. At this point, Patricia immediately jumped in, her voice tense. "She's lazy about practicing. I signed her up for lessons at the best center in Seattle, and she won't even try." Uncle Robert saw this and immediately tried to defend Sophie. He said loudly, "Sophie's still young. Give it time, and she'll get interested." Patricia didn't respond to Uncle Robert. She stayed silent, staring at her daughter with a look of annoyance. While the atmosphere was tense, my dad made a grave mistake. He turned to Lily and said to everyone proudly, "Lily's different. She's so hardworking. She practices violin every day, right, Lily?" After my dad's unexpected question, Lily nodded shyly, seeming uncomfortable with the comparison. At that moment, I saw Sophie lower her head, her shoulders trembling slightly. Patricia gripped her wine glass tighter on the party table, and her face darkened. Realizing my dad's toxic comparison, I wanted to say something to smooth things over, but Dad continued enthusiastically. "Lily even got into the gifted class. My Lily is the best." After that statement, Mom glanced at Dad with a look of annoyance but said nothing. Patricia gritted her teeth, trying to suppress something boiling inside. At this point, Uncle Robert tried to salvage the situation. Once again, he said loudly, "Both Sophie and Lily are wonderful. Each has their own talents." After Uncle Robert's words, the other relatives immediately changed the subject to avoid a potentially unnecessary conflict within the family. At that time, I had no idea that a storm was slowly forming, and in just a few minutes it would tear my family apart. After dinner, when everyone was getting ready to exchange gifts, my dad clapped his hands and excitedly said, "Lily, I heard you play really well. Play something for me." Hearing Grandpa's request, Lily looked up at me with worried eyes. I nodded slightly to encourage her, and right after that, she shyly stepped forward, taking the violin from the case she had brought into the house. When Lily stood in the middle of the living room, I could see her little fingers trembling slightly as she placed the violin on her shoulder. A few seconds later, my daughter took a deep breath, then started playing the piece she had practiced for weeks, a silent night arranged in her own style. The moment the first sound rang out, my dad sat up straight, his face lighting up with pride. At that time, Sophie looked at Lily with undisguised admiration. Kevin nodded in rhythm and whispered, "Awesome." Uncle Robert and Aunt Betty also listened intently, their faces full of joy as they heard the melodic tune. Even Howard nodded to the rhythm, showing genuine interest for the first time that evening. Only Patricia and my mom sat with faces cold as ice. Patricia's eyes narrowed every time Lily completed a difficult passage, and Mom looked away as if she didn't want to witness it. And then, something I could never imagine even in my dreams happened. Right when Lily reached the climax, Patricia suddenly stood up. With quick and decisive steps, she walked straight toward Lily. Before anyone could react, Patricia yanked the violin right out of my daughter's hands. The music stopped abruptly. Lily stumbled backward, her eyes wide with horror. Right after that, my daughter screamed in a terrified voice, "Aunt Patricia, don't!" But it was too late. Patricia held the violin up high and slammed it hard onto the floor. The sound of breaking would tore through the air. The $15,000 violin, the gift I had worked overtime and saved for 2 years to buy my daughter, was now shattered into pieces. The strings snapped and twisted, the body cracked open, the neck almost completely separated. At this moment, Sophie jumped up from her chair, her face pale with horror. She screamed with a choked voice, "Mom, don't do that, don't." Kevin and Uncle Robert also jumped up at the same time, their faces full of horror. Kevin yelled, "Patricia, are you crazy?" Aunt Betty covered her mouth with her hand, her eyes wide with shock. After everyone had screamed, Patricia didn't stop. She stepped on the broken pieces, grinding them under her heels like she wanted to erase the violin from existence entirely. The moment I saw that scene, my heart seemed to stop beating for a few seconds. Then intense pain hit me, not physical pain, but the pain of witnessing my child's violin being smashed. And Lily, my daughter, stood there, her whole body shaking, tears streaming down her young face. She looked at the broken pieces of her violin, then looked up at me with eyes full of despair. After my sister's unexpected action, my dad jumped up from his chair. He yelled, "Patricia, are you crazy? What the hell are you doing?" Patricia didn't answer. She just stood there, staring intently at my daughter, as if she were looking at an enemy. Right after that, she laughed loudly, a cold laugh that chilled me to the bone. At this point, I couldn't control myself anymore. Rage flared up, burning away all reason. I lunged toward Patricia, fists clenched, just wanting to teach her a lesson. But before I could reach her, Howard, Kevin, and my dad jumped in to intervene. Howard grabbed my arm, Kevin held my shoulder, and my dad stood between Patricia and me, blocking our way. I screamed in fury. "Let me go! She destroyed my daughter's violin. Let go." Kevin held me tight and said firmly, "Marcus, calm down. Violence won't solve anything." I struggled violently, trying to break free from their restraint. After everything that happened, my mom still sat calmly on the sofa, her face cold without a hint of emotion. She just said quietly in an even voice, "Calm down. It's just a violin." That statement from my mom was like pouring more oil on the fire of my anger. I struggled trying to break free, but couldn't. They were holding me too tight. In that chaos, no one noticed Jennifer. My wife had stood up at some point, moving silently like a shadow. Then suddenly, Jennifer grabbed Patricia's arm and pulled hard. To everyone's amazement, my wife dragged my sister into the bedroom just a few steps from the living room. The door slammed shut with a firm thud. Everyone stood there stunned for a few seconds at my wife's unexpected action. Kevin and my dad let me go, then rushed to the door and pounded hard. My dad yelled, "Jennifer, open the door. What are you doing in there?" Howard also ran over, constantly turning the doorknob, but it was useless. From inside came Patricia's screams, desperate cries for help mixed with the sounds of impact. "Help me! Help me!" Patricia's voice echoed out desperately. Howard now used his shoulder to ram the door, but it didn't budge. He screamed, "Jennifer, open the door right now. I'll call the police." Uncle Robert stood beside with a helpless expression on his face, while Aunt Betty hugged Sophie, who was sobbing uncontrollably. At this point, my mom stood up, walked near the door, but didn't seem panicked at all. She stood there, her face cold, observing everything. I stood in the middle of the living room, not knowing what to do. Part of me wanted to break down the door and stop Jennifer. But another part, the dark part one didn't dare admit, felt a strange satisfaction. 5 minutes passed like a century. Then the door opened. Patricia stepped out with a bruised face, swollen lips, and disheveled hair. She was staggering and had to lean against the wall to stand steady. A streak of dried blood stuck to the corner of her mouth. Uncle Robert and Aunt Betty both gasped in horror upon seeing Patricia's condition. Dad saw Patricia's face. He stepped back with a horrified expression and said, "My God, Jennifer, did you beat Patricia like this?" Seeing her beloved daughter beaten, my mom approached Patricia, helping her sit down on a chair. Then she turned to Jennifer with cold eyes and screamed, "How dare you hit my daughter? How dare you hit your husband's sister?" Jennifer now stood in the doorway, her face strangely calm. My wife shrugged and replied coldly, "She fell on her own. If you don't believe it, ask her. I didn't hit anyone." Patricia screamed with a trembling voice, "She's crazy. I'll call the police. I'll put her in jail." Right then, Dad stepped into the middle of the room. He took a deep breath, trying to regain his composure. Then he turned to Patricia with stern eyes. My dad pointed at the broken violin and said heavily, "Patricia, I'm asking you, why did you smash Lily's violin?" Patricia stammered back, "Dad, look at my face. I got beaten like this, and you're still asking about the violin?" Dad replied firmly, "I'm asking you first. Please answer me. Why did you do that?" Patricia was silent, couldn't answer. At this point, Dad turned to Jennifer, his eyes still stern. He said to my wife, "Jennifer, I understand you're angry because your daughter was treated like this, but hitting people is wrong. No matter what Patricia did, you don't have the right to use violence. Jennifer replied calmly, I know. I'm ready to take responsibility. After my wife's answer, Dad sighed, turned to Patricia, and continued, Patricia, you need to apologize to Lily and compensate her for the violin. That violin was Lily's property. You had no right to destroy it. Immediately, Mom jumped up, her voice cold as she asked Dad, What are you saying? Your daughter got beaten like this, and you're making her apologize? After Mom's question, Dad immediately turned to her, saying firmly, Be quiet. Patricia was wrong first. She smashed a 10-year-old child's violin. Don't you see Lily crying over there? Mom looked at Dad with angry eyes and replied, You always take Marcus's side. Your daughter got her face beaten up, and you're still making her apologize. Are you even her father? What Mom said then made my dad even angrier. Dad slammed his hand on the table, his voice booming. Who am I taking sides with? I'm trying to be fair. Patricia smashing the violin was wrong. Jennifer hitting someone was also wrong. Both need to take responsibility. What Dad said then made everyone present nod in agreement. Kevin now said loudly, That's right, that's fair. A few seconds later, my dad turned to Patricia and ordered, You apologize to Lily and compensate her $15,000 for the violin. Right now. Patricia immediately screamed, No, I won't apologize. I won't compensate. Why is it always about Lily? Why does she always get praised? Sophie is also your granddaughter, but do you ever care about her? Patricia's question fell into silence. At this point, Dad looked at Patricia with disappointed eyes and asked directly, So it's because of jealousy? You're jealous of a 10-year-old child? After Dad's question, Mom jumped in, her voice cold. Enough. Patricia isn't wrong. Sophie is always compared to Lily. Every time the family gets together, you only talk about Lily. Lily plays the violin well, Lily studies well, Lily this, Lily that. What about Sophie? Do you ever ask about Sophie? Dad and Mom looked at each other, the atmosphere tense to the point of suffocation. Right then, there was the sound of a car stopping in front of the door. Then the doorbell rang. Dad went to open the door, and I saw 2 police officers standing there. I turned to look around the room, trying to figure out who called the police. Then I caught Kevin's eyes. He stood in the corner of the room, phone still in his hand, nodding at me. Right after that, Kevin walked over to me and whispered, I called right after Patricia smashed the violin. This was too serious to handle within the family. At that moment, I knew that, however painful it was, Kevin had done the right thing. Our family needed outside intervention. After my dad opened the door, 2 police officers walked in, quickly assessing the situation. The male officer saw Patricia's bruised face, the broken violin pieces on the floor, and Lily crying in my arms. The male officer spoke with a professional tone. We received a report about an incident here. Can someone tell me what happened? My dad stepped forward, trying to stay calm, and replied, I'm the homeowner. It's a bit complicated, officer. At this point, Patricia rushed in front of the police, pointed at Jennifer, and screamed, She hit me. Look at my face. I want to report assault. The female officer approached Patricia, examining the injuries on her face. Then she turned to look at Jennifer with serious eyes. At this point, Jennifer stepped forward, her voice still calm as she replied, Yes, I hit her. But before that, she grabbed my daughter's violin and smashed it into pieces. My daughter is only 10 years old. Immediately, the male officer looked down at the pile of broken violins on the floor, then looked at Lily, who was crying. He took out his notepad and said, All right, we need to get statements from everyone. Please stay calm and cooperate. The statement-taking process lasted nearly an hour. The female officer spoke privately with Lily, gently inquiring about what had happened. The male officer took statements from me, Jennifer, Patricia, and the others. Kevin was also questioned as a witness. He recounted everything in detail and honestly. While the police were taking statements from the others, I sat in the corner of the living room, holding Lily in my arms. My mind was spinning with the images of what had just happened, but then old memories began flooding back like a torrent. The relationship between Patricia and me was never peaceful. Since we were little, we lived in 2 different worlds under one roof. Patricia was Mom's favorite daughter while I was closer to Dad. I remember when I was 12, I entered my school's art contest and won first place. Dad was thrilled, as if he'd won the lottery. He bragged to all the relatives and hung my painting right in the middle of the living room. Mom was different. She looked at the painting indifferently, then made a cold comment. "What good is drawing? Why don't you focus on proper studying?" Patricia was standing next to Mom then, laughing mockingly and saying sarcastically, "That's right. How can drawing support anyone? Just keep dreaming." I stood there, feeling like someone had dumped a bucket of cold water on my face. Dad wanted to defend me, but Mom had already turned and walked away, dragging Patricia with her. That divide grew deeper over the years. Mom always gave all her attention to Patricia, from studying to work, from marriage relationships. And me, in her eyes, I was always the impractical child with useless passions. Dad was the opposite. He supported all my decisions, from studying engineering instead of business, as Mom had wanted, to marrying Jennifer. He often said, "You live your own life, Marcus. Don't let anyone decide for you." But that very favoritism created an irreparable crack. Patricia always felt Dad loved me more, while I thought Mom never acknowledged me. And now, history was repeating itself with the next generation. Dad loved Lily excessively, while Sophie was abandoned in the shadows. I realized this, but it was too late. In that moment, I wondered if I bore some responsibility for this tragedy. Had I unknowingly contributed to the comparison by always bragging about Lily without thinking about Sophie's feelings? The answer was painful, because I knew that even though it wasn't intentional, I had also contributed to my little niece's wounds. An hour later, after collecting all the information, the male officer stepped into the middle of the room and announced, based on the statements and evidence, "We will file reports on 2 incidents. First, Mrs. Patricia Webb is charged with intentionally destroying property, specifically a violin valued at $15,000, which belonged to Lily Webb. Second, Mrs. Jennifer Webb is charged with assault causing bodily harm to Mrs. Patricia Webb." Patricia immediately screamed, "What? Am I being charged? I'm the victim here." The male officer looked at her with serious eyes and replied, "Ma'am, your destruction of another person's property, especially a child's property, is a violation of the law. Both parties will have to face legal responsibility." At this point, Mom stepped beside Patricia, her voice cold as she spoke to the police. "We'll hire a lawyer. You'll have to pay." Hearing Mom's words, Dad shook his head, his face tired and disappointed. He said nothing, just turned and walked into the kitchen. That Christmas night ended with the police filing reports and scheduling both parties to come to the station to complete the necessary procedures. We left my parents' house in silence, Lily sleeping exhausted in my arms. On the way home, Jennifer drove while I sat in the back with my daughter. My wife didn't say a word, but I could see her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. I knew that from that night, nothing would ever be the same again. The days after Christmas night were the darkest time for my family. Lily fell into depression. She wouldn't talk, wouldn't eat, and lie curled up in bed all day. Whenever I asked if she wanted anything, Lily just shook her head and turned to face the wall. After discussing thoroughly with my wife, I took my daughter to see a child psychologist. In the first therapy session, Lily didn't say a word. She sat there like a statue, her lifeless eyes staring into space. By the third session, she suddenly burst into tears. The doctor told me that Lily had said through her tears, "I don't want to play violin anymore. I'm scared people will hate me. I'm scared that, because of me, Mom and Dad got in trouble." Hearing those words, my heart felt like someone was squeezing it. My daughter, an innocent 10-year-old child, was blaming herself for what the adults had caused. Jennifer also changed. She became quieter, often sitting alone in the dark. I knew my wife was carrying the burden of guilt, even though she never admitted it. One night, when Lily was asleep, I sat down next to Jennifer and asked, "Are you okay?" Jennifer was silent for a long time. Then she turned to look at me, her eyes red as she replied, "I don't regret hitting her, Marcus. If anyone dares touch our daughter, I'll do it again. But I'm scared. I'm scared Lily will think her mom is violent." Hearing my wife's words, I took her hand, unsure of what to say, as I was also carrying similar fears. 3 months later, the trial took place at Seattle Criminal Court. That day, I sat in the back row, Jennifer sitting next to me. Lily wasn't there because I didn't want her to face the people who had hurt her. Patricia sat on the other side with her lawyer. Mom sat right behind her, her face still cold as always. Dad didn't come because he didn't want to witness the family taking each other to court. The trial proceeded according to proper procedure. All evidence was presented thoroughly. Images of the shattered violin, the receipt for the $15,000 violin, witness testimonies, and medical reports about Patricia's injuries. When asked to explain her actions, Patricia stood up with a tense face. Her lawyer tried to argue that it was a momentary reaction due to long-term psychological pressure. But then, the prosecutor asked directly, "Ms. Patricia, can you explain why you acted that way toward a 10-year-old child's violin?" After that question, Patricia was silent for a moment. Then she burst into tears, crying as she spoke. "I couldn't stand it anymore. Every time the family got together, everyone only talked about Lily. Lily's so good at this. Lily's so talented at that. What about my daughter? Sophie tries too, Sophie studies hard too, but no one bothers to look at my daughter. My dad only cares about Lily. I've had to listen to those comparisons for years." Her words made the entire courtroom fall into heavy silence. A few seconds later, she turned to look at me with hateful eyes and asked me, "Marcus, do you know how my daughter feels? Every time she goes to her grandparents' house, she cries because she feels inferior. She asks me why Grandpa doesn't love her like he loves Lily. Do you understand that feeling?" After that question, I sat in silence, not knowing how to feel. Part of me understood Patricia's pain, but another part still couldn't forgive what she had done to my daughter. After hearing the cases presented by all parties, the judge delivered the verdict. Patricia was convicted of intentionally destroying property. Sentence: 2 years probation, mandatory anger management classes, and $15,000 compensation for the violin. Jennifer was convicted of assault causing minor injuries. Sentence: $2,000 fine and mandatory anger management classes. When the judge banged the gavel to end the session, I looked at Jennifer. My wife sat there with a calm face, but I could see her shoulders sag slightly. A moment later, Mom stood up, helping Patricia out of the courtroom. When walking past where I sat, she stopped for a second, looking at me with eyes cold as ice. She said nothing, just turned and walked out. That was the last time I saw Mom. A week after the trial, I was sitting in the living room when I heard the doorbell. When I opened it, I saw Dad standing there, his face more gaunt and tired than when I last saw him. Dad looked at me with red eyes, then said softly, "Can I come in?" I nodded, opening the door wide for him to enter. Jennifer was in the kitchen. She looked out, then quietly retreated to the back room, giving my father and me private space. Dad sat down on the sofa, hands clasped together, head hung low. He was silent for a long time, as if trying to organize the thoughts in his head. Then he looked up at me, his voice trembling as he said to me, "Marcus, I came here to apologize." I sat down across from him, said nothing, waiting. Dad took a deep breath, then continued, "I was wrong. I should have intervened earlier. I saw Patricia becoming increasingly stressed, and I saw Sophie withdrawing more and more, but I didn't do anything. I kept thinking everything would work itself out, but it didn't." After that statement, he paused, swallowing as if trying to control his emotions, then continued, "And I have to admit, I lacked sensitivity. I love Lily, that's true. However, I didn't realize that every time I praised Lily, Sophie felt left out. I unknowingly compared my 2 granddaughters without thinking about the consequences." Dad looked down at his hands, his voice choking as he continued, "Sophie is my granddaughter. She deserves to be loved just as Lily does. But I failed. I wasn't fair to her." I sat there, emotions welling up inside me. This was the first time I saw Dad admit his mistake so honestly. A moment later, Dad looked up at me, then said, "I'm not asking you to forgive Patricia. What she did was unacceptable. But I want you to understand, I also bear responsibility for this. If I had been more sensitive, if I had intervened earlier, maybe things would have been different." Hearing Dad's confession, I stood up and walked over to sit next to him. I put my hand on his shoulder and said, "I understand, Dad. I don't blame you." Dad turned to look at me. We sat there for a long time, saying nothing. Sometimes silence is the most powerful language. Over 2 years have passed since that fateful Christmas night. Lily is now 12 years old. She has overcome those initial traumas. I bought her a new violin, and Lily started playing again. Last week, she was chosen for her school's youth orchestra. Jennifer and I are still together. We went through the hardest period together, and our relationship, instead of falling apart, became stronger. She completed her anger management classes and underwent significant changes. We learned to communicate more effectively with each other and share our emotions instead of keeping them bottled up inside. Dad still calls me every week. He still visits Lily, and every time he sees her, he tries to control himself not to compare, not to brag too much. I know he's trying to change, and that's enough for me to appreciate. Mom is still silent. Almost 2 years without a phone call, without a text message. Dad says she's still angry at me, still thinks I destroyed the family. I'm not sure if she'll ever change, but I've learned to accept that reality. Patricia completed her anger management classes and paid the full $15,000 in compensation. According to what Dad told me, she's changed a lot, is less angry, and is trying to rebuild her relationship with Sophie. I'm not sure if I'll ever forgive her, but I hope Sophie will be okay. Something unexpected happened a few months ago. I received a letter from Sophie. She wrote that she doesn't blame Lily. She understands that what her mom did was wrong. Sophie apologized on behalf of her mother and said she misses Lily, as well as the times the two cousins used to play together before everything happened. I read the letter, then I gave it to Lily to read. Lily cried. Since then, Lily and Sophie started texting each other. At first, just short messages, checking on each other. Then, gradually, the two talked more and shared more. I didn't stop it, because I understand that both Lily and Sophie are victims in this tragedy. They shouldn't have to bear the consequences of the adults' mistakes. After everything we've been through, I want to share with you 5 pieces of advice I learned from my family's tragedy. First, never compare children to each other. Each child has their own value, and each deserves to be loved fairly. Don't let one child live in another's shadow. Second, always control your emotions, especially in tense situations. No matter how angry you get, violence is never the best solution. Let the law intervene. Third, speak out about emotions instead of letting them fester. Patricia had been harboring resentment for years without anyone being aware of it. If she had honestly told Dad about feeling discriminated against early on, if she had shared Sophie's pain, maybe things would have been different. Fourth, don't let children carry adults' guilt. Both Lily and Sophie are victims in this story. Sophie blamed herself for thinking she wasn't good enough, and Lily felt guilty for being excellent and making others jealous. This is something I never want to see. Finally, could you intervene early when you see signs of tension? Both Dad and I noticed that Patricia was getting more stressed, while Sophie was withdrawing more, but we thought everything would work itself out. This was a mistake. When you notice unusual signs in your family, take the initiative to understand and address problems at their root. Don't wait until everything explodes. My story ends here. Before finishing this story, I have a question I want to ask you. If I were you, witnessing your sister smashing your child's violin, what would I do? Please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below this story. And if the story moved you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. Goodbye and see you again.